Dear reader, this is another voice that time has almost silenced, a forgotten letter written by those who remain, so that the story of those who left does not fade away. They found him 3 days after the shelling stopped. His body was half buried in the churned mud near Verdun, the earth black and trembling still from what it had endured. Around him the winter mist hung low, muffling every sound except the soft drip of melted frost from a ruined trench beam. His fingers were clenched tight, as though gripping something he would not let go of even in death. When the medics pried his hand open, they found a small note. Folded and stained, its ink bled into the paper like a bruise. The handwriting was uneven, rushed. The words seemed to tremble as if they too were afraid. It was not a message to command, not a prayer to God, but a few lines meant for someone far away. A woman's name appeared in the corner, Claire, and below it, a sentence that no one in the recovery unit would ever forget. If I do not come back, tell her I was still dreaming of the orchard. The officer who read it looked away, his throat tightening. He slipped the paper into his breast pocket before the others could see more. He would later write a report, he would list the dead, he would fold his own memories away as soldiers do. But that single line about the orchard would follow him through every silence that came after. Who was Claire, and what dream had followed this man into the heart of hell? My name is Etienne Morel, a school teacher from the small town of Saint-Mihiel, near the Meuse. I was called to Verdun in the spring of 1917 to serve not as a soldier, but as a clerk in the field hospital. My duty was to record names, effects, and the last words of those who would not return. I had thought that kind of work would numb the heart, that writing death 100 times a day would turn it into a kind of arithmetic. But there was something about this particular soldier, the one with the note in his hand, that refused to become a number. His uniform was caked with mud, his face nearly unrecognizable, yet in his pocket we found a locket containing a photograph, a young woman with kind eyes and a field of blossoms behind her, and in his other hand, that note. Those few words reached across the wreckage and touched something human that even the war could not erase. That night, when the lamps flickered low and the guns paused long enough for the air to breathe again, I copied the words into my journal. I do not know why, only that they seemed to belong to more than just one man. Perhaps every soldier here carries some orchard within him, some image of peace that the shells cannot destroy. The morning after his body arrived, the air over Verdun hung heavy with fog, and the smell of cordite still clung to everything. I remember walking past the rows of makeshift crosses and feeling how strange it was to stand in a place where so much had ended. And yet somewhere beyond the front, the world still went on. It was then that I heard a young stretcher-bearer humming, a faint tune like a lullaby. He was scrubbing mud from his boots when I asked him whether he knew the man whose hand had clutched that note. He looked up, squinting through the smoke. "You mean Delaunay?" he said. "Yes, I remember him. Corporal Lucien Delaunay, quiet fellow, always writing something." He paused, then smiled, that rare human expression that seemed almost forbidden here. He used to talk about his father's orchard, down by the river in Reims. Said when the wind blew, the blossoms fell like snow. That single image, petals falling like snow, struck me more deeply than I can explain. Amid all this ruin, I found myself picturing that orchard, sunlight streaming through white branches, bees humming lazily among the flowers, the soft scent of earth and fruit mingling in the air. I imagined Lucien there, long before the war, perhaps leaning against a tree with a book in his hand, watching Claire pick apples into her apron. Later that evening, when the hospital lamps were lowered and the shelling faded to a distant murmur, I sat beside my cot and tried to see it as he must have seen it. The rhythm of the leaves, the sound of the river, the laughter of someone who believed there would always be another spring. The more I thought of it, the more it felt like a memory of my own. That is what grief does here. It steals the boundaries between lives. Each man who falls leaves behind a piece of himself that the rest of us must carry. One night I stepped outside to breathe. The moon hung low over the battlefield, pale as bone, and the air was sharp with frost. Somewhere beyond the trenches, I caught the faintest whiff of something sweet, a scent that shouldn't have been there, not amid the stench of decay and gunpowder. Apple blossoms. Impossible, I told myself. Yet it lingered, fragile and persistent, as if a wind had carried it from a gentler world. Perhaps the mind invents such things to survive. But in that moment I believed it was real, that the orchard Lucian had loved so fiercely had followed him, hovering unseen above this scarred land, waiting to receive him. In the following days, I began asking the wounded what they dreamed of. Some said home, others spoke of fields, mothers, or a favorite song. None mentioned medals or victory. Always, it was something ordinary. A child's laughter, a warm loaf of bread, the way morning lights struck the kitchen wall. Lucian's orchard was one of those dreams, an anchor to something tender and unbroken. Weeks later, when I packed his few belongings for the archives, I placed the note gently on top. I found beneath the paper a second scrap, a fragment of a letter half finished. Only one line was legible. "When this ends, I will take her there again." He had meant to return. They all had. I have never seen that orchard, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I can hear its quiet rustle, a promise whispered through time. Perhaps the earth remembers what we plant within it, even when we are gone. The note, by the time I dared to unfold it again, had become almost too fragile to touch. It was the size of a child's palm, torn from the edge of a notebook, the kind issued to soldiers for recording rations or coordinates. The paper was stiff with dried mud, and when I held it near the lamp, I could see where water or tears had blurred its corners. I breathed slowly, afraid that even my breath might scatter what little remained. The words came through faintly at first, like whispers beneath the surface of the page. "Claire, if I do not come back, tell the trees I did not forget them. Tell them I will walk there again in another spring." I read it again and again until the meaning seemed to shift. It was no longer only a note from one man to one woman. It felt larger, as though he were writing not to her alone, but to life itself, to memory, to the possibility of beauty surviving the ruin. I copied the lines carefully into my ledger, then closed my eyes. I tried to imagine the moment he had written it, a lull between bombardments, the dim light of a candle guttering in the dugout, mud streaked across his fingers. Perhaps his comrades were asleep beside him, or pretending to be. Perhaps he thought, if I do not write this now, there will be no later. That night, the wind carried a strange quiet over the camp. The guns had paused, and for the first time in weeks, I could hear the crackle of a distant fire, someone burning refuse perhaps, or letters that could not be sent. I remember thinking how fragile paper seemed in times like these, and yet how it often outlasted the bodies that wrote upon it. Over the following days, I asked questions in whispers among stretcher-bearers, nurses, and those few soldiers who had known Corporal Delaunay. One of them, a medic from Nancy, told me something that lingered. He used to keep that note in his breast pocket, the man said. He wrote it weeks before he died, said it helped him sleep, said he could smell the apple blossoms even when the air stank of death. The medic smiled faintly then, though there was no joy in it. We used to laugh, said he was half mad, dreaming of trees in this place. But when he died, when we found him holding it, none of us laughed anymore. Later that evening, I returned to my tent and unfolded the note once more. The ink, though faded, seemed to pulse faintly under the lamplight. It felt alive, as if in writing it, Lucian had pressed a heartbeat into the page. In the silence, I thought of all the notes that never reached anyone, the words swallowed by mud, the letters burned or buried with their writers, each one a fragment of love or memory lost to the earth. But this one had survived, though barely. It had endured the same shelling that tore apart the hill it lay beneath. Perhaps that endurance was its message. As the months passed, I found myself speaking to it. I would whisper small things when I was alone. We are still here. The guns have not won. The trees are waiting. It became my ritual of defiance, a small act of faith in the face of annihilation. When the spring of 1918 came, the hospital was moved south. I packed the note in a small envelope and kept it close. Every time I opened it, I could almost hear the murmur of wind through leaves, the sound of bees returning to the branches. In those moments, the war felt distant, as though I had stepped briefly into another world, the one Lucien Delaunay had carried within him until his last breath. When the armistice was signed, I stayed behind to help identify the fallen. The living went home to parades and promises, but those of us who remained walked among the silence, a silence so deep that even the wind seemed afraid to stir. Every step I took felt like treading through the remnants of a prayer. By then, Lucien Delaunay's note had become part of me. I carried it through the dismal months of cataloguing bones, through the endless lists typed and retyped, until names blurred into a single sorrow. I had resolved that if I ever survived this, I would find Claire. It was the only promise I allowed myself to make. In March of 1919, I found her name in a civilian registry near Reims. Claire Fournier, 23, seamstress. The orchard, it seemed, had truly existed. Her address was listed beside a road I had once taken as a boy. When I arrived, I saw the trees first, bare, their branches twisted and skeletal in the cold air, but still standing. Beyond them, a small cottage leaned against the wind, smoke curling faintly from the chimney. She opened the door before I could knock. Her face was pale, her hands raw from winter work, but there was something unmistakable in her eyes, that same quiet strength I had seen in the photograph Lucienne carried. "Madame Fournier?" I asked. She nodded. "You've come from Verdun," she said, not as a question, but as if she had been waiting to say those words for a long time. I told her my name, my duty, and why I had come. I held out the envelope that contained Lucien's note. She took it carefully, the way one might hold a bird with a broken wing. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she asked me to come inside. The room was small and warm. The walls were hung with scraps of embroidery, fragments of color in an otherwise gray world. On the table sat a single vase filled with dried blossoms. I remember how she looked at them before she unfolded the note, as though gathering the courage to face what she already knew. Her eyes moved slowly over the words. When she reached the end, she pressed the paper to her lips. "He used to say this orchard was the world," she whispered, "that it was where he learned what peace meant. I told him once that trees don't dream. He said they do. They just dream more quietly than we do." Outside, the wind rattled the branches. She stood and looked through the window. "When the news came," she said softly, "I couldn't go near the trees. For months I couldn't even look at them. But last spring, I thought I heard something, a sound in the wind, almost like him calling." She took her shawl and motioned for me to follow. Together we walked into the orchard. The ground was damp, and the air smelled faintly of moss and rain. She stopped beneath one of the larger trees, its bark scarred and split from age. "This one," she said, touching it gently. "This was where he asked me to wait for him." She leaned her forehead against the trunk, her breath fogging the cold air. "Every spring, I come here when the blossoms return. I tell him what has happened in the world, who was born, who has gone. It helps me remember that time still moves forward." I handed her the locket we had found with his body. Inside was her photograph, a little faded now, the edges curled. She smiled, barely. "He was always afraid it would break," she said. "But look, it made the journey." We stood there a long while, saying nothing. The light dimmed, and the first hint of snow began to fall, white flakes landing among the dark branches. For a moment, the orchard seemed alive again, as if the trees themselves were breathing in the silence. Before I left, she asked me to read the note aloud one last time. My voice trembled as I spoke the words, "If I do not come back, tell her I was still dreaming of the orchard." She closed her eyes. "Then he did come back," she said, "just not the way we expected." I walked away through the falling snow, and behind me I heard her whisper something to the trees. The words were lost in the wind, but I think I knew what they were. Years have passed since that day in Claire's orchard. The war ended, though its echoes have never truly ceased. I returned to Saint-Mihiel to teach again, to a classroom rebuilt from ashes. The chalk dust rose like mist in the morning sunlight, and the sound of children reciting their lessons carried across the same fields where soldiers once marched. I tried to lose myself in the rhythm of ordinary days, in the scrape of pencils, the smell of ink, the rustle of pages turned. Yet every spring, when the apple trees near the school began to bloom, I felt that familiar ache return. Lucien's note still lies in my desk drawer, folded between the pages of my old wartime journal. The ink has faded almost to sepia now, but the words remain legible, stubborn against the passing years. Sometimes when I open the drawer, the faintest trace of earth still clings to it, as though Verdun itself refuses to let go. In 1927, I received a letter from Claire. Her handwriting was careful, graceful, as though each word had been weighed. She wrote that the orchard had survived the harsh winters and that every year she still tended it herself. "I keep it as he left it," she wrote, "and when it blooms, I tell the trees his story, so they will remember the boy who once dreamed among them." She enclosed a small photograph, the orchard in full bloom, white blossoms stretching to the horizon. At the center stood a stone marker, modest and unadorned, engraved with only 3 words, "He dreamed here." Beneath it, I could just make out a shadow, perhaps hers, standing quietly beside it. I placed that photograph beside Lucien's note. The two belonged together, bound by silence and love that outlived war. Over the years, I have learned that memory does not fade as easily as history believes. It lingers in ordinary moments. The smell of wet leaves after rain, the low hum of bees, the way light filters through branches. Sometimes, while walking home at dusk, I hear laughter carried by the wind and think of those who never came home to hear it again. Each generation rebuilds on the bones of the last, and yet something of them remains, not in monuments or medals, but in the small acts of tending, remembering, and retelling. The orchard, I've come to believe, is not only a place of trees and blossoms, it is a symbol of what cannot be destroyed. Every life, however brief, plants something in the soil of time, and though war may scorch the ground, it cannot erase what roots itself in love. Last spring, I visited Claire. Her hair had gone grey, and her hands bore the marks of work and weather. But when she smiled, I could still see the young woman from the locket, the one who had waited beside the trees. We walked slowly through the orchard together. The blossoms had begun to fall, drifting like snow over the soft grass. "He would have liked this year's bloom," she said quietly. "The petals came early. They always do when the winter's been kind." We stopped by the marker. I knelt and brushed away a few fallen petals. "Do you still dream of him?" I asked. She looked up through the branches, her eyes following the movement of the blossoms in the breeze. "Not of him," she said. "With him. In dreams, he walks beside me still." That night, as I boarded the train home, I looked out the window one last time. The orchard receded into the distance, a pale sea of white beneath the evening sky. And I thought of all the men whose dreams never made it home, of all the notes that were lost, of all the orchards buried in silence. When the train curved along the valley, I saw something glimmer through the fog, the faint shimmer of petals caught in the wind. For a moment, it seemed as though the earth itself were remembering them. Perhaps that is what remembrance truly means, not the grand speeches or the stone memorials, but the quiet act of keeping something alive in our hearts. A letter, a tree, a dream whispered to the wind. Lucien's words have become more than a note found in a soldier's hand. They are a promise kept through time, that even in darkness beauty endures. And when we remember them, when we speak their names softly into the stillness, perhaps somewhere they are still dreaming of the orchard. If this story moved you, dear reader, please like and subscribe to the channel, not for me, but for them, so that the lost voices of those who dreamed amid the ruins will never be forgotten. Nova versão do GPT disponível. Continue conversando na versão antiga ou inicie um novo chat na versão mais recente.